The forest was eerily silent that morning, save for the occasional rustle of leaves as a breeze swept through. It was an ordinary day in the dense woods of northern Canada, or so it seemed until a deafening explosion shattered the tranquility. A streak of fire tore across the sky, leaving behind a trail of smoke and ash. Moments later, a massive object crashed into the earth with such force that it shook the ground miles away. Birds scattered in panic, and animals fled deeper into the wilderness, seeking safety from whatever had invaded their domain. Ethan Carter heard the commotion while tending to his greenhouse, nestled deep within the forest he called home. He paused mid-task, his hand still clutching a pair of pruning shears. His brow furrowed as he gazed toward the horizon, where thick plumes of smoke now billowed upward. Curiosity gnawed at him, but caution held him back. Ethan wasn't one to meddle in things beyond his understanding. He'd learned that lesson the hard way years ago when tragedy struck his family. Still, something about the crash unsettled him. It didn't feel like a plane or any kind of human-made craft. Against his better judgment, he decided to investigate. Armed with nothing more than a flashlight, a sturdy walking stick, and his trusty backpack filled with basic supplies, Ethan set off toward the source of the disturbance. The journey was arduous. Fallen trees blocked his path, and the terrain grew increasingly treacherous as he ventured further into the untamed wilderness. By the time he reached the crash site hours later, sweat soaked his shirt, and his legs ached from the climb. What he found there left him speechless. A massive crater stretched before him, its edges scorched black. At its center lay the remnants of what could only be described as a spacecraft, its metallic surface gleaming faintly despite being battered and broken. Strange symbols etched into the hull pulsed with a dim blue light, giving the impression of life, even though the vessel itself appeared dead. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he approached cautiously, half expecting some alien monstrosity to leap out at him. Instead, he discovered something far more unexpected. Lying motionless among the wreckage was a figure unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. She, if she was even the right term, had skin that shimmered like liquid silver under the sunlight filtering through the trees. Her slender frame was clad in tattered garments made of unfamiliar material, and her face bore features both alien and hauntingly beautiful. Most striking were the glowing markings that adorned her arms and neck, pulsating softly as if alive. Ethan knelt beside her, his breath catching in his throat. Was she alive? He pressed 2 fingers gently against her neck, searching for a pulse, or whatever equivalent might exist for someone like her. To his relief, he felt a faint rhythm beneath his fingertips. Whatever she was still breathing. But she was clearly injured. Bruises marred her otherwise flawless skin, and dried blood caked the side of her head. Ethan hesitated, torn between fear and compassion. This creature came from somewhere else entirely, a place beyond Earth. And yet she looked so vulnerable, so human in her fragility. Before he could make up his mind, a low hum filled the air. Ethan froze, his eyes darting skyward as several sleek ships descended silently above the clearing. They hovered noiselessly, their surfaces reflecting the surrounding trees like mirrors. A hatch opened on one of them, and figures emerged, tall, angular beings with elongated limbs and cold, expressionless faces. They moved with mechanical precision, scanning the area with devices that emitted soft beams of light. Ethan ducked behind a nearby boulder, watching in stunned silence as the aliens approached the unconscious woman. One of them knelt beside her, examining her injuries briefly before exchanging terse words with the others in a language that sounded like a series of clicks and whirs. Then, without warning, they turned away, boarding their ships without so much as a backward glance. Within moments, the vessels vanished into the sky, leaving the woman alone once again. Ethan's stomach churned with anger and disbelief. How could they just abandon her like that? She was one of them, or at least she must have been. Yet they hadn't even tried to help her. As the realization sank in, Ethan knew what he had to do. He couldn't leave her here to die. Whatever dangers she might pose, whatever mysteries surrounded her origins, none of that mattered right now. All that mattered was that she needed help, and he was the only one around to give it. Gathering his courage, Ethan carefully lifted the woman into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, almost weightless, and her glowing markings brightened slightly at his touch. For a brief moment, he thought he saw her eyelids flutter, but she remained unconscious. Cradling her protectively, Ethan began the long trek back to his cabin, determined to nurse her back to health no matter the cost. As he walked, questions swirled in his mind. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why had her own people abandoned her? Ethan didn't know the answers, and perhaps he never would. But one thing was certain: this strange encounter marked the beginning of something extraordinary, a story that would change not only his life, but possibly the fate of the entire world. For now, though, all Ethan could focus on was getting her to safety, one step at a time. The journey back to Ethan's cabin was grueling, but his determination never wavered. Every step he took carried the weight of responsibility, not just for the mysterious woman in his arms, but also for the unknown consequences her presence might bring. The forest seemed quieter than usual, as if nature itself held its breath, aware of the stranger now passing through its domain. Ethan's mind raced with questions, possibilities, and fears, yet one thought anchored him. He had made a choice to save her, and he would see it through no matter what. When they finally arrived at his secluded cabin nestled deep within the woods, Ethan laid the silver-skinned woman gently on his bed. Her glowing markings pulsed faintly, casting an ethereal light across the room. He covered her with a blanket, unsure if she felt cold like humans did, then stepped back to assess her condition. Her injuries were more severe than he'd initially realized. Bruises darkened her delicate skin, and dried blood matted her silvery hair. Whatever accident had brought her here had clearly been traumatic. Ethan fetched his first aid kit, though he doubted its contents would be sufficient for treating someone so different. Still, he cleaned her wounds carefully, using warm water and antiseptic wipes. As he worked, he couldn't help but marvel at her otherworldly appearance. Her skin shimmered under the soft glow of the bedside lamp, and her bioluminescent markings shifted subtly, almost rhythmically, like waves lapping against a shore. Despite her alien features, there was something profoundly human about her vulnerability. Hours passed, and exhaustion began to creep over Ethan. He debated whether to stay awake or rest, but before he could decide, the woman stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes that glowed faintly gold, like twin suns breaking through clouds. She blinked slowly, taking in her surroundings with a mixture of confusion and alarm. When she noticed Ethan sitting nearby, she flinched, pulling herself into a defensive position. "Hey," Ethan said softly, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "It's okay. You're safe here." Of course, she didn't understand him. Her gaze darted around the room, searching for threats, and when she tried to speak, only a series of melodic tones escaped her lips. It was unlike any language Ethan had ever heard, fluid and musical, yet completely unintelligible. Sensing her distress, he pointed to himself and said, "Ethan." She tilted her head slightly, studying him with those luminous eyes. After a moment, she hesitantly touched her chest and replied with a single syllable, "Lizera." Ethan smiled faintly, repeating the name, "Lizera." Her expression softened, though she remained wary. Communication between them was limited, but it was a start. Over the next few days, Ethan dedicated himself to caring for Lizera, while trying to bridge the gap between their worlds. He brought her food, simple things like fruit, bread, and water, but she showed little interest in eating. Instead, she seemed fascinated by everything around her, from the flickering flame of a candle to the chirping birds outside the window. One evening, as Ethan sat at his desk sketching plants for his research, Lizera approached him cautiously. She reached out to touch the pencil in his hand, her fingers brushing his briefly. In that instant, a jolt of energy surged through him, not painful, but startling. Images flashed in his mind: vast star-filled skies, towering crystalline cities, and beings moving in harmony like a living symphony. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the vision faded, leaving Ethan breathless. He looked up at Lizura, who wore an apologetic expression. She placed a hand on her temple and mimicked the act of drawing, as if explaining something. Ethan realized then that she was telepathic. Her touch had allowed him to glimpse fragments of her memories. Though overwhelmed, he found himself eager to learn more. Over time, their communication improved. Lizura mimicked Ethan's words and gestures, learning basic phrases like "thank you" and "I'm hungry." Meanwhile, Ethan discovered that her telepathy wasn't limited to physical contact. Sometimes, when she concentrated hard enough, she could project simple thoughts directly into his mind. They began sharing pieces of their lives. Ethan told her about Earth, his work as a botanist, and the loneliness he'd endured after losing his family. Lizura, in turn, shared glimpses of her own world, a society driven by logic and efficiency, where emotions were seen as weaknesses. Through these exchanges, Ethan learned why Lizura had been abandoned. Her people prized strength and utility above all else, viewing compassion and empathy as liabilities. Lizura, however, had always struggled to suppress her emotions, often questioning the rigid norms of her culture. This difference had isolated her, making her an outsider even among her own kind. When her ship crashed and she was injured, her companions deemed her unworthy of rescue, a decision that cut deeper than any physical wound. Hearing this, Ethan felt a surge of protectiveness toward her. He understood what it meant to feel like an outcast. After his wife and daughter died in a car accident years ago, he'd retreated from society, isolating himself in the forest to escape the pain. But meeting Lizura had changed something within him. For the first time in years, he felt connected to another being, to life itself. Their bond deepened as weeks turned into months. Lizura adapted remarkably well to her new environment, learning to navigate the cabin and even helping Ethan with small tasks around the greenhouse. In return, Ethan continued teaching her about Earth, introducing her to concepts like laughter, friendship, and kindness. Together, they created a fragile but beautiful balance, a merging of two vastly different worlds. Yet beneath the surface of their growing relationship lay lingering uncertainties. Neither knew how long Lizura could, or should, stay on Earth. What if others discovered her? What if her people returned? These questions loomed large, casting shadows over their newfound happiness. But for now, they chose to focus on the present, cherishing each moment as it came. As autumn painted the forest in hues of orange and gold, Ethan and Lizura stood side by side on the porch, watching the sunset. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant rain. Without warning, Lizura reached out and took Ethan's hand, her glowing markings brightening ever so slightly. Though she couldn't put it into words, Ethan understood. She was grateful, not just for his care, but for proving that not everyone saw her as expendable. In saving her, he had given her hope, and in return, she had given him a reason to keep living. For the first time in years, both of them felt truly alive. As autumn deepened, Ethan and Lizura settled into a routine that felt almost normal. The days passed quietly, filled with small moments of discovery and connection. Ethan taught Lizura more about Earth, how to identify different plants, how seasons worked, and even how to laugh at his clumsy attempts to mimic her melodic tones. In return, Lizura shared glimpses of her world through telepathic visions, showing him landscapes bathed in perpetual twilight and skies streaked with colors no human eye had ever seen. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, but beneath the surface of this newfound harmony, strange occurrences began to unsettle the forest around them. It started subtly, a rabbit darting across the clearing outside the cabin, its movements erratic and unnatural. Then came the birds. They stopped singing altogether, retreating deeper into the woods as if fleeing some unseen predator. Plants near the crash site grew at an alarming rate, their leaves curling unnaturally and glowing faintly under moonlight. Ethan noticed these changes during his daily walks through the forest, but he dismissed them as coincidences until one night when the lights appeared. Ethan was sitting by the fireplace, reading a book while Lizera examined a potted fern in the corner of the room. Suddenly, she froze, her glowing markings dimming as if reacting to something far away. Her head snapped toward the window, and her golden eyes widened with alarm. Ethan followed her gaze just in time to see flashes of blue and green light flickering beyond the trees. They pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat, casting eerie shadows on the walls of the cabin. "What is it?" Ethan asked, rising from his chair. Lizera hesitated before placing a hand on his temple. Instantly, images flooded his mind. The crashed ship, its power core destabilizing, leaking energy into the surrounding environment. This energy wasn't harmless. It was mutating the ecosystem, warping life forms, and creating imbalances that could spiral out of control. Worse still, the residual radiation might attract unwanted attention from other alien forces, including those who had abandoned her. Ethan's stomach churned as the implications sank in. If left unchecked, the destabilized core could devastate not only the forest, but potentially the entire planet. And attracting hostile aliens would put both Earth and Lizera in grave danger. There was only one solution. They had to return to the crash site and neutralize the core. The thought terrified Ethan. Returning to the place where he found Lizera meant confronting memories of the mysterious ships and the cold indifference of her people. But he couldn't let fear stop him, not when so much was at stake. "We have to go," Ethan said firmly, meeting Lizera's worried gaze. "Together." Lizera nodded slowly, though her expression betrayed her unease. She didn't want to endanger Ethan further, but she knew he wouldn't back down. Besides, she trusted him completely. A trust forged over months of shared experiences and mutual understanding. The journey back to the crash site took 2 days, longer than Ethan anticipated due to the increasingly bizarre behavior of the forest. Trees twisted unnaturally, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Streams bubbled with strange, iridescent foam, and animals flooded the sound of their footsteps. At night, the temperature dropped sharply, yet the air felt charged, crackling with static electricity. Ethan carried a backpack filled with tools and supplies, while Lizera used her telepathy to guide them, sensing the growing instability of the power core. On the second evening, as they set up camp near a rocky outcrop, Ethan noticed Lizera staring intently at the horizon. Her markings pulsed rapidly, signaling distress. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "What's wrong?" he asked. She closed her eyes, projecting fragmented images into his mind. Looming figures clad in dark armor, weapons gleaming ominously. Ethan frowned. Were these memories? Or warnings? "Are you saying someone's coming?" he pressed. Lizera nodded grimly. Whether it was her own people or another faction drawn by the energy signature, they were running out of time. By midday on the third day, they reached the crater where the ship had crashed. The scene was hauntingly familiar, yet undeniably worse. The once smooth hull of the spacecraft now resembled molten metal, warped and blackened by exposure. Strange vines wrapped around the wreckage, pulsating with the same glow as Lizera's markings. The ground itself seemed alive, shifting slightly beneath their feet. "This way," Lizera whispered, leading Ethan toward a jagged opening in the ship's side. Inside, the interior was a labyrinth of twisted corridors and sparking consoles. Blue light emanated from cracks in the walls, illuminating their path. The air smelled metallic and sharp, making Ethan's throat burn with every breath. They eventually reached what appeared to be the engine room. At its center floated a massive sphere, hovering inches above the floor. It radiated intense heat, and waves of energy rippled outward, distorting the air around it. This was the power core, the source of the chaos spreading throughout the forest. Lizera stepped forward, her hands trembling as she extended them toward the sphere. Ethan watched anxiously, unsure of what she intended to do. Without warning, tendrils of light shot out from the core, wrapping around her arms and pulling her closer. She gasped, her markings flaring brightly as she struggled against the force. "Lizera," Ethan shouted, rushing to her side. "I can stabilize it," she projected into his mind, her voice strained. "But I need your help." Ethan didn't hesitate. Grabbing hold of her waist, he braced himself against the pull of the core. Together, they focused all their strength and willpower on containing the unstable energy. Slowly, painfully, the sphere began to shrink, its glow dimming until it stabilized into a dormant state. Exhausted, Lizera collapsed into Ethan's arms. For a moment, they simply held each other, grateful to have survived. But their relief was short-lived. From outside the ship came the unmistakable hum of engines, and the sound of boots crunching against gravel. "They're here," Lizera murmured, her voice tinged with dread. Ethan tightened his grip on her protectively. Whoever, or whatever, was approaching, they would face it together. As the first shadowy figure appeared at the entrance of the ship, Ethan realized this was only the beginning of their fight. The forest, the crash site, and even their fragile peace were all at risk. But one thing was certain. Neither Ethan nor Lizera would give up without a struggle. The sound of boots crunching against the gravel outside the ship sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He instinctively pulled Lizera closer, shielding her with his body as he peered toward the entrance. The glowing core had dimmed, its energy now contained, but the arrival of unknown visitors shattered any sense of relief they'd briefly felt. A group of men clad in black tactical gear stepped into view, their faces obscured by helmets and visors. Each carried advanced weapons that hummed faintly, emitting an eerie blue light similar to the destabilized core. Leading them was a tall, imposing figure whose cold eyes scanned the room with calculated precision. This man, clearly the leader, spoke first, his voice sharp and commanding. "What have we here?" he said, his gaze locking onto Lizera. "Looks like we found our prize." Ethan tightened his grip on Lizera, his heart pounding. "Who are you?" he demanded, trying to mask his fear with defiance. The leader smirked, ignoring Ethan's question. Instead, he gestured to one of his men, who raised a device resembling a scanner. A beam of light swept over Lizera, and the machine emitted a series of beeps. "Bingo," the leader muttered, his smirk widening. "This one's worth a fortune. Bring her." Before Ethan could react, two mercenaries lunged forward, grabbing Lizera roughly. She struggled, her glowing markings flaring brightly as she tried to resist, but their strength overwhelmed her. Ethan threw himself at them, shouting for them to stop, but another pair of mercenaries intercepted him, pinning him to the ground. "Let her go," Ethan shouted, thrashing against their hold. "She hasn't done anything wrong." The leader chuckled darkly, stepping closer. "Oh, she's done plenty. Her kind brought this mess to our doorstep. And now, thanks to you, we'll clean it up and profit from it." Ethan's blood ran cold. These weren't explorers or scientists. They were mercenaries, hired by someone desperate to exploit alien technology for personal gain. The destabilized core wasn't just a threat to the environment. It was a treasure trove waiting to be harvested. Lizera was dragged out of the ship, her protests muffled as they gagged her with a piece of cloth. Ethan fought harder, managing to break free momentarily, but a swift blow to his ribs knocked the wind out of him. Gasping for air, he collapsed to the ground, watching helplessly as the mercenaries hauled Lizera away. "Don't worry," the leader sneered, crouching beside Ethan. "You've been useful. Once we're done extracting what we need, maybe we'll let you live." With that, the mercenaries disappeared into the forest, leaving Ethan battered and alone. For a moment, despair threatened to consume him. He had failed. After everything he'd done to protect Lizera, she was gone, taken by people who saw her not as a person, but as a commodity. But giving up wasn't an option, not if there was even the smallest chance of saving her. Ethan forced himself to his feet, wincing at the pain in his side. He retrieved his backpack, which had fallen during the scuffle, and began retracing the mercenaries' path. Hours later, Ethan stumbled upon a clearing where several vehicles were parked near a makeshift camp. Tents surrounded a large truck equipped with heavy machinery, likely intended for dismantling the alien ship. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their weapons trained on anyone who approached. Ethan crouched behind a tree, observing the scene carefully. His heart sank when he spotted Lazira sitting inside a reinforced cage, her hands bound and her head bowed. He knew he couldn't take on the mercenaries alone. Even if he managed to sneak past the guards, freeing Lazira would require more than brute force. It would take strategy and allies. But who could possibly help him? As if answering his unspoken plea, a rustling sound came from the bushes nearby. Ethan tensed, ready to defend himself, but instead of another mercenary, a young woman emerged. She wore hiking gear and carried a camera slung over her shoulder. Her name was Claire, and she was part of a small team of environmental activists monitoring the forest for signs of ecological damage. "You okay?" Claire whispered, noticing Ethan's injuries. Ethan hesitated before nodding. "I need your help," he said urgently. "They've got someone, a friend, in there. We can't let them hurt her." Claire frowned, glancing toward the camp. "We've been tracking these guys for weeks. They're dangerous, Ethan. Whatever they're doing here isn't good." "They're planning to weaponize alien tech," Ethan explained quickly. "If we don't stop them, it could destroy everything." Claire's eyes widened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she nodded resolutely. "All right, what's the plan?" Working together, Ethan and the activists devised a daring rescue mission. Using Claire's knowledge of the area, they identified weak points in the camp's defenses. One member of the team, a tech-savvy teenager named Sam, hacked into the mercenaries' communication system, creating distractions by triggering false alarms. Meanwhile, Ethan prepared to infiltrate the camp under the cover of darkness. That night, chaos erupted as the mercenaries scrambled to respond to the decoy threats. Flares shot into the sky, drawing most of the guards away from the center of the camp. Seizing the opportunity, Ethan slipped through the shadows, making his way to Lazira's cage. When he reached her, she looked up, her golden eyes filling with relief. "Ethan," she projected weakly into his mind. "I'm getting you out of here," he promised, using a pair of bolt cutters stolen from the activists to break the lock. Once freed, Lazira stood shakily, leaning on Ethan for support. Together, they moved cautiously back toward the edge of the camp, where Claire and the others waited with a getaway vehicle. But just as they thought they were in the clear, the leader appeared, blocking their path. His expression was grim, and he raised his weapon, aiming directly at Ethan. "You really think you can win?" he growled. Before he could fire, a loud roar echoed through the forest. Startled, everyone turned to see a massive creature emerge from the trees, a mutated bear, its fur glowing faintly due to the destabilized core's influence. The distraction gave Ethan and Lazira the opening they needed. They sprinted past the leader, leaping into the waiting vehicle as Claire slammed the accelerator to the floor. As they sped away, Ethan glanced back at the camp, now engulfed in confusion and panic. For the first time since meeting Lazira, he allowed himself a small smile. They had escaped, but the fight was far from over. Back at the cabin, Ethan and Lazira sat by the fireplace, nursing their wounds and reflecting on what had happened. Though they were safe for now, the mercenaries' presence was a stark reminder of humanity's darker impulses. Greed and fear drove people to exploit anything they didn't understand, no matter the cost. But amidst the danger, Ethan realized something important. Lazira wasn't just an alien stranded on Earth. She was a symbol of hope, a reminder that compassion and unity could overcome even the greatest challenges. And as long as they stood together, they would face whatever came next. The days following their narrow escape from the mercenaries were tense. Ethan and Lazira remained vigilant, knowing that the danger hadn't truly passed. The mercenaries' leader, whose name they later learned was Victor Kane, wasn't the type to give up easily. His obsession with alien technology, and his ruthless determination to exploit it, meant he would stop at nothing to retrieve Lizira. Every creak of the cabin's wooden floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside, set Ethan on edge. Lizira, too, was unsettled. Her glowing markings pulsed erratically, a reflection of her anxiety. She spent hours staring out the window, her telepathic senses stretched thin as she tried to detect any signs of pursuit. Despite her efforts, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "We can't stay here forever," Ethan said one evening, breaking the silence that had settled over the cabin. "If they find us again, we won't be so lucky." Lizira turned to face him, her golden eyes filled with resolve. "We must finish what we started," she projected into his mind. "The core is still unstable. If someone else finds it." Ethan nodded grimly. He knew she was right. Neutralizing the power core once and for all was the only way to ensure both Earth and Lizira remained safe. But returning to the crash site meant risking another confrontation, not just with Victor Kane, but potentially with other forces drawn by the lingering energy signature. The next morning, Ethan and Lizira packed supplies and set out for the forest, accompanied by Claire and Sam. The activists had insisted on helping, unwilling to stand by while greed and violence threatened the planet they were trying to protect. Armed with makeshift tools, stolen tech, and sheer determination, the group prepared for what might be their most dangerous mission yet. The journey back to the crash site was fraught with tension. The forest seemed darker than before, its beauty marred by the unnatural growths spreading throughout the area. Trees twisted into grotesque shapes, their bark shimmering faintly with alien energy. Streams bubbled with iridescent foam, and the air carried an electric charge that made everyone's hair stand on end. "This place feels wrong," Sam muttered, clutching a scanner that beeped erratically. "It is wrong," Lizira replied, her voice echoing softly in their minds. "The core's instability is poisoning everything around it. We must hurry." As they neared the crater, the hum of machinery grew louder. Peering through the trees, they saw that Victor Kane and his team had returned, setting up even more equipment to extract the core's remaining energy. Dozens of mercenaries patrolled the area, their weapons trained on anyone who approached. "Looks like we're not the only ones who want this thing gone," Claire whispered, her brow furrowed. Ethan studied the scene carefully, formulating a plan. "We need a distraction," he said quietly, "something big enough to draw them away from the ship." Sam grinned mischievously. "Leave that to me." Under the cover of darkness, Sam activated a device he'd rigged together using parts scavenged from the mercenaries' earlier camp. The gadget emitted a high-pitched frequency that mimicked the sound of an approaching alien vessel. Within moments, alarms blared across the clearing, sending the mercenaries into a frenzy. Believing they were under attack, Victor ordered his men to prepare for combat. While the mercenaries scrambled to defend their position, Ethan, Lizira, Claire, and Sam slipped past the chaos unnoticed. They reached the ship's interior without incident, navigating the twisted corridors until they stood once again before the pulsating core. "This will hurt," Lizira warned, extending her hands toward the sphere. "But I can contain it if you help me stabilize the process." Ethan stepped forward without hesitation, placing his hands over hers. Together, they focused all their strength and willpower on containing the volatile energy. The core resisted, sending waves of heat and light surging outward. Ethan gritted his teeth against the pain, sweat dripping down his face as he fought to maintain control. Claire and Sam worked quickly, using tools to dismantle the surrounding machinery and sever the connections feeding off the core's energy. Sparks flew as circuits overloaded, and the entire structure groaned ominously. "We've got maybe 2 minutes before this thing collapses," Sam shouted, his voice barely audible over the noise. "Keep going," Ethan yelled back, his voice strained. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the core stabilized. Its glow dimmed, shrinking until it disappeared entirely. Exhausted, Lizira collapsed into Ethan's arms, her markings fading to a soft, steady pulse. "We did it," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief. But their victory was short-lived. Before they could celebrate, Victor Kane appeared at the entrance of the room, his expression livid. Behind him stood several armed mercenaries, their weapons aimed directly at the group. "You think you can ruin my plans?" Victor snarled, stepping closer. "Do you have any idea how much money I've invested in this operation? How many people I've bribed to look the other way?" Ethan shielded Lizira protectively, glaring at Victor. "This isn't about money. You're playing with forces you don't understand, and putting innocent lives at risk." Victor smirked coldly. "Innocent? There's no such thing. Not anymore." Without warning, he raised his weapon, aiming straight at Ethan. Time seemed to slow as Lizira stepped in front of him, her glowing markings flaring brightly. "No," she cried aloud, surprising everyone, including herself. Her voice resonated through the room, carrying an authority that silenced even Victor. For a moment, no one moved. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, Lizira unleashed a wave of telepathic force that knocked the mercenaries off their feet. Weapons clattered to the ground as Victor stumbled backward, stunned. "Go," Lizira urged, turning to Ethan and the others. "I'll hold them off." Ethan hesitated, torn between escaping and staying to fight alongside her. But Lizira's gaze was unwavering. "Trust me," she projected into his mind. Reluctantly, Ethan nodded. Grabbing Claire and Sam, he led them out of the ship, leaving Lizira behind to face Victor alone. Inside the ship, Lizira squared off against Victor, her markings blazing like miniature suns. Though outnumbered, she refused to back down. This wasn't just about protecting Earth or stopping Victor. It was about proving that compassion and courage could triumph over greed and fear. With a final surge of energy, she disabled the mercenaries' weapons and sealed the ship's exits, trapping Victor and his men inside. As the structure began to collapse around them, she sprinted toward the exit, narrowly escaping before the entire ship imploded in a burst of light and smoke. Outside, Ethan and the others watched in awe as the wreckage disintegrated into nothingness. Moments later, Lizira emerged from the dust, her body battered but alive. Ethan ran to her, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You did it," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Lizira smiled weakly, leaning into his arms. "We did it," she corrected softly. Though the immediate threat was gone, they knew the battle wasn't over. Victor Kane's actions were a symptom of a larger problem, one rooted in humanity's darkest impulses. But standing together, united by trust and love, Ethan and Lizira vowed to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For now, though, they allowed themselves a moment of peace, watching as the first rays of dawn broke through the horizon. The forest, though scarred, began to heal. And so did they. The aftermath of the ship's destruction left an indelible mark on both the forest and its inhabitants. The once twisted trees began to straighten, shedding their unnatural glow as if exhaling a long-held breath. Streams flowed clear again, freed from the iridescent foam that had tainted them. Nature, resilient as ever, started healing itself. But for Ethan, Lizira, Claire, and Sam, the scars ran deeper than mere physical wounds. Victor Kane and his mercenaries were presumed dead, buried beneath the rubble of their greed-fueled ambitions. Yet Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this victory came at a cost. Humanity's darker impulses, greed, exploitation, indifference, had been laid bare in Victor's actions. It was a sobering reminder that danger didn't always come from beyond the stars. Sometimes it lurked much closer to home. For Lizira, the battle had been transformative. She had saved them all, unleashing powers she hadn't fully understood until that moment. But the effort had drained her, leaving her physically weak and emotionally raw. As they returned to Ethan's cabin, she remained quiet, staring out the window with a distant look in her golden eyes. One evening, as the fire crackled softly in the hearth, Ethan approached her cautiously. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, sitting beside her on the couch. Lizera hesitated before nodding faintly. "I am. Different now," she admitted, projecting her thoughts into his mind. "When I used my abilities against Victor, I felt something awaken within me. Something powerful, but also frightening." Ethan reached out, taking her hand in his. "You did what you had to do. You protected us and Earth. That takes courage, not fear." She smiled weakly, her markings glowing softly in response to his reassurance. "But what happens next? My people abandoned me. If others discover me here..." Her voice trailed off, heavy with unspoken fears. Ethan squeezed her hand firmly. "Then we'll face it together. You're not alone anymore, Lizera. I promised to protect you. And I meant it." His words brought tears to her eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she truly believed she belonged somewhere. Claire and Sam stayed with them for several days, helping repair the damage caused by the mercenaries' presence. During that time, they shared stories around the fireplace, bonding over their shared ordeal. Claire spoke passionately about her work as an environmental activist, explaining how her team monitored ecosystems threatened by human interference. Sam, eager to impress everyone, demonstrated his tech skills by repairing Ethan's old radio and even rigging up a makeshift security system for the cabin. "You two are quite the pair," Claire remarked one night, glancing between Ethan and Lizera. "You've given us hope. Proof that humans and aliens can coexist peacefully." Ethan chuckled nervously. "We're just trying to survive, honestly. But yeah, maybe there's something to that idea." Lizera nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps my arrival here was not an accident. Perhaps it is a chance, for both our worlds, to learn from each other." Her words lingered in the air, sparking a conversation about what came next. Claire suggested reaching out to trusted allies who might help shield Lizera from discovery, while Sam proposed using his hacking skills to monitor any unusual activity in the area. Together, they formed a plan to keep Lizera safe while ensuring the destabilized core posed no further threat. As the days turned into weeks, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Ethan resumed his work in the greenhouse, teaching Lizera more about Earth's flora and fauna. In return, she introduced him to concepts from her world, sharing memories of crystalline forests and skies filled with twin suns. Their bond deepened with every passing day, evolving into something neither had anticipated: love. It wasn't spoken aloud, at least not in words. Instead, it manifested in small gestures, the way Ethan instinctively reached for her hand when crossing rough terrain, or how Lizera lit up whenever he entered the room. Even Claire noticed, smiling knowingly as she watched them interact. "They're kind of adorable, aren't they?" she whispered to Sam one afternoon as they worked on fortifying the cabin's perimeter. Sam smirked. "Yeah, but let's hope they don't get too distracted. We've still got a lot to figure out." Despite their newfound peace, questions loomed large. What would happen if Lizera's people, or worse, hostile forces, returned? Could she truly hide indefinitely on Earth? And most importantly, did she want to? One night, under a sky blanketed with stars, Lizera finally voiced her doubts. "Ethan," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "this planet is beautiful, and your kindness has changed me in ways I never imagined. But staying here means living in fear of discovery, of judgment, of harm coming to those I care about." She paused, her gaze meeting his. "There is another option." Ethan frowned, concern flickering across his face. "What do you mean?" "There is a colony, a hidden refuge for beings like me who seek peace rather than conflict. They fled the same war that destroyed my home. If we go there, I could find answers. About myself, about my past. And you." She hesitated, searching for the right words. "You wouldn't have to sacrifice everything for me anymore." Ethan stared at her, stunned. The thought of losing her was unbearable, yet he understood why she needed to consider this path. Leaving Earth meant stepping into the unknown, a daunting prospect for anyone, let alone someone tied to the only world he'd ever known. But as he gazed into her luminous eyes, he realized something profound. Love wasn't about holding on. It was about letting go when necessary. "If that's what you need," he said softly, "then I'll support you. But I'm coming with you." Lizara's expression softened, tears welling in her eyes. "You would leave everything behind for me." "I already did," Ethan replied simply. "From the moment I found you in that forest, my life changed. Wherever you go, I go. That's how it works." Their decision sparked a flurry of preparations. Using parts salvaged from the remnants of the crashed ship, along with Sam's ingenuity, they constructed a rudimentary vessel capable of space travel. It wasn't luxurious, but it would get them to the coordinates Lizara provided for the hidden colony. On the eve of their departure, Claire and Sam joined Ethan and Lizara outside the cabin for one final farewell. "This isn't goodbye," Claire insisted, hugging Ethan tightly. "You've given us hope. Someday, when the world is ready, we'll tell your story. And maybe then, humanity will be ready to meet the stars." Sam grinned, handing Ethan a small device. "And this is for emergencies. If you ever need backup, just hit the button. We'll find you." Ethan chuckled, touched by their loyalty. "Thank you for everything." As dawn broke over the horizon, Ethan and Lizara boarded the ship together. The engine hummed to life, casting a soft glow across the clearing. With one last glance at the cabin and the life they were leaving behind, they soared into the sky, disappearing among the stars. Though uncertainty lay ahead, they faced it side by side, united by trust, love, and the belief that even in the vastness of the universe, connection was possible. Their journey was far from over, but for now, they embraced the promise of a new beginning. The journey through the stars was unlike anything Ethan had ever imagined. The ship, though rudimentary, carried them effortlessly through the vast expanse of space. Lizara guided it with practiced ease, her hands moving instinctively over the controls as if reconnecting with a forgotten skill. For Ethan, every moment felt surreal. Watching Earth shrink into a distant blue dot, gazing at constellations he'd only seen in books, and marveling at the sheer immensity of the universe. Yet amidst the wonder, there was an undercurrent of nervousness. What awaited them at the hidden colony? Would they find refuge or hostility? Lizara sensed his unease and reached out to take his hand. "We'll be all right," she projected into his mind, her voice steady despite the uncertainty ahead. "This is a place of peace. They will understand." Ethan nodded, drawing strength from her confidence. He trusted her completely, just as she had trusted him since their first meeting. Together, they faced the unknown, leaning on each other for support. Days passed, or what felt like days. Time seemed irrelevant in the vacuum of space. The ship's small interior became both a sanctuary and a reminder of how far they had come. Ethan spent hours learning about Lizara's culture, piecing together fragments of her past through telepathic memories she shared willingly now. She showed him her homeworld, a breathtaking planet of crystalline cities and endless skies, but also its darker side, the rigid society that had rejected her empathy, the war that had torn her people apart. In return, Ethan told her about his life on Earth, the joys of family, the pain of loss, and the quiet solace he'd found in the forest before fate brought them together. Their stories intertwined, forming a tapestry of two vastly different worlds united by shared humanity, or perhaps something greater. As they approached the colony's location, excitement mingled with apprehension. According to Lizara's coordinates, the refuge existed within the orbit of a dying star, concealed by layers of cosmic debris. It was a clever hiding spot, impossible to detect without precise knowledge of its existence. When the ship finally emerged from the asteroid field, the sight took Ethan's breath away. A massive orbital structure floated serenely against the backdrop of the fiery star. Its surface shimmered with iridescent panels, reflecting light in dazzling patterns. Smaller vessels drifted around it, their designs sleek yet unassuming. Unlike the cold efficiency of Lizara's original ship, this place radiated warmth and life. "They're here," Lizara whispered, her markings glowing brightly with anticipation. "This is where we begin again." Their arrival was met with cautious curiosity. A group of beings, some resembling Lizara, others entirely alien, greeted them as they docked. Their expressions were guarded but not hostile, their eyes filled with questions rather than judgment. One figure stepped forward, taller than the rest, with flowing robes that shimmered like liquid silver. "Welcome," the being said, its voice resonating softly in their minds. "You have traveled far to reach us. Why have you come?" Lizara stepped forward, her posture confident despite the weight of scrutiny. "I am Lizara, once of the Velari. I seek refuge and understanding." The leader studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "And your companion?" "This is Ethan," Lizara replied, gesturing toward him. "He saved my life when no one else would. Without him, I would not stand here today." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and several pairs of eyes turned to Ethan. He shifted uncomfortably under their gaze but held his ground, meeting their stares with quiet resolve. The leader inclined its head respectfully. "Then you are both welcome here. Come, we will show you our home." The interior of the colony was even more astonishing than its exterior. Wide corridors lined with bioluminescent plants led to expansive chambers filled with art, music, and technology seamlessly integrated into daily life. Beings of all shapes and sizes moved harmoniously, their interactions marked by mutual respect and cooperation. It was a stark contrast to the rigid hierarchy of Lizara's former world and to the fractured societies of Earth. Over the following weeks, Ethan and Lizara immersed themselves in the colony's culture. They attended gatherings where stories were shared, participated in rituals celebrating unity, and learned about the colony's mission: to create a haven for those who sought peace over conflict. Slowly, they began to feel at home. For Ethan, adapting wasn't easy. Everything, from the food to the language to the social customs, was foreign. But Lizara remained by his side, patiently guiding him through each challenge. In turn, he introduced aspects of human culture, sharing tales of Earth's beauty and resilience. His openness earned him admiration and respect, bridging gaps between species in ways no one had anticipated. One evening, during a gathering beneath a dome that simulated a starry sky, the colony's leader addressed the assembled crowd. "Today, we celebrate not just survival, but connection," it declared, its voice echoing warmly. "Through Lizara and Ethan, we see proof that differences can become strengths, that love transcends boundaries of race, species, and worlds." Applause erupted, and Ethan felt Lizara squeeze his hand tightly. Her markings glowed brighter than ever, mirroring the joy radiating from her heart. Later that night, as they stood alone beneath the simulated stars, Ethan turned to her with a smile. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Lizara tilted her head thoughtfully before responding. "There is no right or wrong, only paths, and the courage to walk them together. This is ours." Ethan nodded, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "Then I'm glad we chose it." Months turned into years, and the colony thrived under the influence of its diverse inhabitants. Ethan and Lizara became ambassadors of sorts, fostering understanding between humans and aliens. Their story spread beyond the refuge, inspiring hope among those who dreamed of coexistence. Eventually, Earth itself began to change. Stories of Ethan and Lizara's journey reached Claire and Sam, who worked tirelessly to share their message with the world. Slowly, humanity started looking outward, not with fear or greed, but with curiosity and compassion. As for Ethan and Lizara, they built a life filled with purpose and love. Though they had left Earth behind, they never forgot it, or the lessons it taught them. Together, they proved that even in the vastness of the universe, connection was possible. Underneath the infinite stars, their bond endured, a testament to the power of trust, courage, and love to transcend all barriers. And so, their legacy lived on, forever etched in the annals of two worlds united by hope.